Welcome, and my name is Jane, and I'm joined by two colleagues, Lauren and Scarlett, and we're all Samaritans at the Gloucester branch. We've been here for different lengths of time, and this, as you will realise, it's the second, in fact, of the series of talks we're giving to mark Mental Health Awareness Week this week. We expect this presentation about mental health to last for about 20-25 minutes. I'm sort of hosting, so I won't be saying very much. Lauren and Scarlett will be doing the presentation, and then I will join at the end to see if there are any questions that arise from the talk. And as we've been doing so far, we're using the chat icon at the bottom of your screens. So if you have any questions, please use that, and then we'll pick them up at the end and try our best to answer whatever's on your mind. So I'm going to pass over to Lauren to start. No, to Scarlett. Sorry, sorry, Scarlett.
Hello, so today we're going to talk about what Samaritans do and why, the impacts on our emotional health, recognising the signs that someone is not coping strategies and building resilience, talking and listening, and how to contact Samaritans. So a little bit about Samaritans for context and backgrounds. Samaritans help people who are going through difficult times by listening to them and trying to help them to explore their feelings. You don't have to have suicidal feelings, however, to contact us. You can talk to us before you reach a crisis point. We're probably best known for answering calls, but you can also email us, write a letter to us, and very soon we'll be offering instant messaging at the Gloucester branch. We've been in existence for over 65 years, and we are made up of more than 20,000 volunteers. We are there for anyone, whatever they're going through, day or night, 365 days a year. We are ordinary people. We're all from different backgrounds with one common goal, and that's to be there for our callers. We give our callers time and attention freely. We're not paid to do that. We aren't professionals and we don't offer counselling, but we will direct callers to other services if it becomes apparent that it's the right thing to do. We undergo an intensive training programme, which is valued highly outside of Samaritans. And by the time a volunteer has completed their training, they're able to listen strongly by giving their whole attention to the person they're supporting, checking they've understood by summarising what's been said, communicating warmth and calm through the tone of voice, writing, or body language, appreciating how that person feels rather than how the volunteer would feel in their situation, and asking gentle, open questions to help people explore their thoughts and feelings in more depth. But we don't only sit and listen, we also take support into our communities, to schools, workplaces, railways, hospitals, festivals, to reach people where they need us. So we also work in partnership with others to improve support for vulnerable groups, with the aim that fewer people will die by suicide. We use our expertise to try and influence governments, the media, and other agencies to take action to help reduce suicides. Some of our shared values in this respect are listening, exploring feelings alleviates distress and helps people to reach a better understanding of the situation and the options open to them. Confidentiality is a big concern, and if people feel safe, they're more likely to be open about their feelings. We're non-judgmental because we want people to be able to talk to us without fear of prejudice or rejection. And we believe that people have the right to find their own solution, and that telling people what to do takes that responsibility away from them. Next slide, please, Lauren. So why what we do matters. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50, and tragically of young people aged between 16 and 24. And tragically for some, suicide can seem like the only option. In 2018, 6,859 people in the UK and the Republic of Ireland took their own life. As I said, suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50. Men are at higher risk than women and make up 3/4 of all deaths by suicide in the UK and 4 in 5 deaths of suicides in the Republic of Ireland. Suicide is complex, obviously, and behind those statistics are 6,859 individuals, each with their own unique story. Every suicide has a devastating impact on the person's families, friends, colleagues, and community. Suicide isn't equal either, and if you're less well off and male, you're 10 times more likely to die by suicide than more well-off men. So some national statistics for you, taken from the Office of National Statistics for 2018, because 2019, those figures are still delayed. 5,021 suicides were registered in England, 76% of which were male and 24% were female. I'll now pass over to my colleague, Lauren, to take you through the ups and downs of the days.
I'll unmute myself. So let's start by looking at the ups and downs of a typical day. It's normal to experience a range of different feelings, not all of which will be positive. The way we feel changes not only from day to day, but also within the day, from hour to hour, and also sometimes from minute to minute. Emotions happen, feelings change, and that's very normal and usual. We're human, and that's life. But when there are more downs than ups, and the downs get deeper, it's important to recognise how we're feeling and to reach out and talk to someone if we're struggling to bounce back from negative feelings. You'll have heard terms like emotional health, mental health, and well-being, and they all mean broadly the same thing. We all understand what's meant by physical health. We know when we feel physically healthy or less healthy. Emotional health is similar in that we all have it, but unlike our physical health, we may not be as clear about what to do when we don't feel good, when we don't feel healthy emotionally. And as we've just seen, lots of different things affect how well we're feeling emotionally, and how we feel can, quite naturally, vary from day to day according to what we're doing, how we're thinking, and how we're feeling. Our emotional reactions are often visible to those around us. If we're feeling grumpy or tearful, for example. But how we're feeling can also be hidden inside. We might be feeling lonely or hopeless. Or we might find things too difficult to talk about with our friends. And everyone's emotional health is different. It's determined by our life's experience and our ability to find ways of coping when things go a bit wrong. Having good emotional health isn't the same thing as being happy all the time. Good emotional health is about our sense of well-being and our ability to cope with all the different things that life throws us. So let's take a closer look at our emotional health and the cogs in that emotional engine. Our emotional health impacts the thoughts we have about ourselves and the people in the world around us. The emotions we experience, excitement, jealousy, anger, hopelessness, and the way we feel physically. We might be tired, we might be in pain, we might be dizzy, we might not have any appetite. All these things affect whether or not we feel okay. And in turn, our emotional health affects our behaviour, what we do, and how we interact with the people in the environment around us. Our emotional health develops as we grow. It changes as we get older, and it's affected by our experiences. And in that respect, young people now will be more or less the first generation to have grown up from birth with digital and social media as part of what is normal for their everyday life. And for lots of reasons, this may well bring a different dimension to their emotional health. All sorts of different things can indicate that someone may need extra support. Being aware of the signs and signals, for yourself as well as for other people, gives you the best chance of taking action before things get out of hand. We're all different, and we all respond to pressure and stress in different ways. Sometimes the signs and signals are quite obvious, but some people will do everything they can to appear normal and in control. So it's really important to look for subtle changes in behaviour, as well as obvious indicators. And even if everything seems fine, if you feel uneasy about someone's well-being, trust your gut instinct and ask if they're okay. So this slide shows some signs and signals that someone may not be okay. So I'm going to give you just a second to read through those bullet points. You may not always be able to spot these signs, especially if people are isolating themselves. These emotions show up differently in everyone, and they may be more difficult to spot if you're seeing less of someone that you're close to. Sometimes people say things that might help you recognize that they're struggling to cope. They might make leading statements like, "You wouldn't believe what I've been through," or "It's like the whole world is against me." People sometimes say these things in the hope that you'll pick up on them and ask them what they mean. Or they might make negative statements about themselves like, "Oh, nobody loves me," or "I'm just a waste of space." And even if it sounds like they're joking, if you're not sure, check they're okay. Life and work can be demanding in all sorts of different ways. And when the pressure builds up, it can feel impossible to find time to look after ourselves and the people around us. A good analogy for emotional resilience is to think of it in terms of holding a bucket. The individual buckets we hold vary in size and they overflow at different points that are unique to each of us. As they fill, there's only so much each of us can bear. We all have our own limits. Each stressful life event fills the bucket a little more. And unless we can find a way to empty it, the issues start to overflow. This can mean that we have reached a point where we feel we can no longer cope at all. Everyone's stress bucket is different in terms of what fills it and its size. When someone is not coping and their stress bucket is overflowing, they can have a horrible feeling of being overwhelmed by everything. So how can we stop our own personal stress bucket from overflowing? By using coping strategies. These help prevent our stress bucket from filling up. Coping strategies are techniques that help reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed by things going on around us over which we have no control. Helpful coping strategies help us to open the tap on our emotional buckets and prevent emotional build-up and overflow. But we need to be careful. Sometimes we mistake unhelpful coping strategies as helpful, but actually they just fill our emotional bucket up even more. So there are lots of things we all do on a day-to-day basis that keep us emotionally healthy. Know yourself and think about what's worked well for you in the past, whether that's listening to certain music, cold water swimming, dancing, or having a cup of tea with a friend. Everyone feels bad at times, but there are lots of different coping strategies that can help us feel better. Relaxation techniques help to reduce anxiety and stress and clear the mind. Eating a balanced diet can help with mood. Exercise releases hormones called endorphins that affect the brain and boost mood. It's important to take time to relax and reflect on how you feel. If we're struggling with our mental health, we may stop doing the things we enjoy, and this can make us feel even worse. So it's important to schedule something you enjoy into your day and your week. If we're struggling with our mental health, we can begin to isolate ourselves, and that can make things worse. And that's why it's so important to stay connected with others. Evidence shows that helping others actually benefits our own mental health and well-being. It can reduce stress, improve emotional well-being, and even help physical health. There may be some local support available. Ask your GP about what's on offer in your area. And if these strategies don't help, try talking to someone you trust about how you're feeling. Talking to someone helps to sort through your feelings. Sometimes we don't really know how we feel, so saying it out loud can help identify the real issues. It can help put things into perspective. Sometimes small worries seem huge, especially if they're filling your thoughts day after day. Talking may help things seem clearer. And it can help release stress. We often hear people say, I really just needed to tell someone. Talking can help build resilience. It helps you learn skills to adapt well to stressful situations. You know that if you feel bad again, there's someone there who cares enough to listen. And really, that's the one key message from our presentation today. It's important to talk to someone if we're struggling with our emotions. Someone able to listen actively is wide awake, interested, willing to try to understand. It can take patience and sometimes persistence too. Passive listening is what we do most of the time. There are noises all around us, traffic, birds singing, the general bustling in the road. Generally, when we realise we need to listen more closely, we make the effort to do so. At Samaritans, we tend to do active listening. That means listening carefully so that you can help the person to talk, to explain, and to explore how they're feeling and what they're struggling with. So active listening takes effort, sometimes a lot of effort, but it's not so difficult. The real issue is getting to know when you need to listen more deeply than normal and to help someone to talk. Because, like we said just now, saying it out loud can help identify the real issues and help you see things more clearly. Learning to listen is the topic of tomorrow's webinar if you're interested. Another way to think of resilience is as a sliding scale, with distress at the farthest left-hand side and strength at the farthest right. Life at the distress end of the scale can be challenging. With little strength, it can be really difficult to face living. Some people in this area may be thinking about suicide. A little further up the scale, to the right, people may find themselves struggling to cope if they've gone through life events that have been draining. Without a chance to offload some of the challenges, it's possible they could slip further down the scale. Another step towards the right of the scale, just over halfway, may be the point at which many of us find ourselves. Here, we have enough strength to deal with the day-to-day challenges that life may throw at us. Life at the strength end of the scale can be exciting. If we're coping well, we may get elevated to this area when really good things happen in our lives. We may not stay here for long though, because being this happy and excited can, for some of us, be very wearing. So we're nearly at the end of our presentation, and I'm going to hand you back to Scarlett for the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Lauren. So to summarise, emotional health and well-being are really important, and many things affect our emotions. Life will always have its ups and downs, and reacting is normal, but take care of yourself. If you are constantly under pressure and no one knows about it, just one or two more things going wrong might leave you feeling overwhelmed. So it's so important to talk to somebody if that happens. Even if a problem can't be solved by talking, having shared how you feel with someone really can be a huge help. And as we've said earlier, you can always talk to Samaritans about whatever is getting to you. We are here around the clock, 24/7, every single day of the year, with our hallmark of respect for confidentiality. On the screen in front of you now are our contact details for email, phone, or writing or visiting. Importantly, as well, in addition to these facts, if you know or speak to someone who needs our help or you think might need our help, please signpost them to us. Third-party signposting to Samaritans is not difficult to do. And if you're concerned that that somebody is having a tough time and you have discussed with them the potential benefit of speaking to a Samaritan, you can make a referral in the following way. You must have the other person's consent to make the referral. You would call the number that you see on screen now, and that call would be picked up by a Samaritans branch anywhere in the UK, not necessarily in Gloucester. You would need to give your first name and telephone number, the first name of the person being referred, their phone number, a best day in the week, and a 3-hour time frame in which we could call them. And as well, again, the confirmation that you have their consent to contact us on their behalf. Please warn the person of concern that Samaritan's number is withheld, so it won't show on their telephone accounts, but it also means they will be answering a withheld number. Again, be aware that calls are treated with confidentiality, so you will not receive any feedback at all about the call. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, both Lauren and Scarlett. I'm sorry if we had a bit of noise distortion through some of those slides. Hope you could hear clearly enough. So we do have a question from Joe. So Joe is saying, I'm interested to learn more about why suicide levels are so much higher for men than women. And he says, or she says, I'm not sure, fantastic brief, thank you. So Lauren and Scarlett, would one of you like to answer that, or shall I have a first effort at answering why suicide levels are so much higher for men than for women?
Go ahead, Jen.
So one of the key factors that we all know is that men find it much more difficult to talk about how they're feeling. There's a perception about needing to be brave and to be strong, and to be the leader, to be the guy who supports other people in the family. And so the tension builds up and the stress builds up and they don't share. We've noticed particularly, and this will be the subject of one of our later talks, that during the pandemic it's been particularly difficult because so many of the normal ways in which men would meet as friends, the pub or through sport or whatever, have been closed. And therefore that inability to have men close by to chat to informally and, by the way, offload some feelings, that has been closed to them, and that's been quite significant. I'm not sure if there's any other. Yes, here we go, from Freya. So Freya says, or Angela says, thank you, very informative. Are you trained for all ages? So yes, we are available for all ages. We do get calls, but more particularly emails from children and young people, but we are able to respond to all ages, and we get calls from young teenagers through to 80s and 90s. We also have Samaritan volunteers from all ages too, so you do have to be 18 or older to become a Samaritan, but once you've trained at that age, people stay with us for decades, and we've got at our branch people who are in their 80s and still manning the phones. So if it were a child who were contacting us, we would potentially signpost to Childline if that were appropriate, but it's not always where young people want to go. So the answer is yes. Essentially, we are trained for all ages. So Sarah's asking, once trained, what number of weekly shifts do you commit to? Either of you want to answer that, or I'll keep going?
I can answer that with my
Go
distorted
for it.
microphone. Yeah, so once we're trained, we commit to doing a session a week, and every 6 weeks we have to do a night duty. Well, we don't have to, but I mean it's expected that we'll do a night duty and we'll do a weekend duty. So if we go on holiday, we can do no shifts 1 week and 2 the following week. It's quite flexible. But yeah, it's a weekly shift.
And the shifts vary in lengths of time. So the longest shift that we are asked to do is 4 hours, and the shortest one I think is 2.5 hours. But yeah, 6 shifts within a 6-week period to fit around your working life. Okay, so Jenny is asking there, how can you support a young person who has a school friend that has committed suicide? Okay, so there's a very specific answer to that question. And many branches have a specialised schools team who are trained to go into a school or a college where there has been a suicide event, as it were, and they offer workshops about coping with some of the things we've talked about today, understanding your feelings, understanding the impact of events on how you're coping, and looking at coping mechanisms and strategies. So sort of some of the things we've talked about today. And if so there are specialised workshops that would deal with a whole class in that situation. If it's not an incident that's happened within a school, if it's a young person known in a different way, we would support them in the way we would support any other call, through helping them to understand how they're feeling, putting that into context, understanding how grief affects you, those sort of issues that we would talk through. And that young person could have a number of calls. We could offer follow-up calls until they're better understanding their own emotions. There is in Gloucestershire, we're very lucky, in Stonehouse, there is a charity called Sunflowers Suicide Support. And that was set up by a young lady who lost a loved one through suicide. So she totally understands the range of emotions and the felt lack of support that she endured. And she is very happy to work with people who have lost friends and loved ones in that particular way. Okay, so Claire's saying, do we have email, phone and face-to-face? Perhaps we'll just repeat what we said there. Yes, we have email, and that's the email address that you'll see on the page at the moment. And the phone number is a free phone, as you see, 116-123. Face-to-face is on hold during the pandemic. Normally you could come into our centre and be seen there face-to-face. Do we have an email, phone, or face-to-face if we're a worker?
And I think what Freya is saying is, do we have to, Freya, I think you're saying, do we have to answer emails, phones and face-to-face? Is that all part of our duty? Or
sorry, I'm being sick. Yeah.
No. I think, and yes, it is. And it can be, and that helps with shifts. It can help to make it varied. As Jane says, we haven't got face-to-face at the moment, but certainly phone predominantly often, because that can be the biggest cue, but also emails as well. And that takes into account, of course, that people want to contact us and feel better, sometimes contacting us in very different ways. And in many cases, people begin with email and then they might move once they have some confidence, move into a place of speaking to us on the phone. But we're absolutely open to whichever tangent works best for the person contacting us, and it's a good variation, and a very different experience actually, phone to email, in my experience.
There was a question also about, again from Freya, saying, I work with 16 to 14-year-olds and it's very difficult to get them to make that first step. How can you deal with this? So I guess my initial response would be that as Samaritans, we recognise that taking that first step to make a call is huge. And it takes a lot of courage to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger. Many people, when they first come on, actually can't speak. They stay quiet for a long time before they pluck up the courage, and we will sit with them until they're able to speak. And we understand that it can feel very emotional. I think you can only give people time until they're ready. You can't force it. So it may take somebody a number of times. They might dial and then hang up until they reach the point where, yeah, okay, now they're ready to make that call. And it's the same whether you're a teenager or an older person. It's still a difficult thing, but I don't know if that answers what you're saying. Do you have any else you'd like to say, Scarlett or Lauren? 16 to 24-year-olds.
Oh, I think that covers it. It probably leads on as well to Jenny Barclay's question, doesn't it, about both your girls experiencing cases, I think you were saying, of suicide with young male teenagers and knowing how to comfort them. It's a really difficult thing, isn't it, when you're so close to the person who requires that comfort, or they're so close to you. And for me, certainly one of the beauties of Samaritans is that ability or grace to be able to talk to a faceless stranger who has absolutely no perception of you whatsoever and is non-judgmental, often will help to open up and allow somebody to express feelings that they're not able to always express for fear of a variety of other things, perhaps upsetting the other person when they're a close relationship. So if that helps at all, Jenny.
There's a question from Lynn, which actually is at the core of what and who we are as Samaritans. The question from Lynn is, do people expect you to solve their problems? And this is something that I think as a mum, as an ordinary pre-Samaritans person, that's what you tend to do. You try and fix. You're a fixer. You try and help your kids. You try and help your neighbours, and that's sort of how you operate. And actually, you have to unlearn all of that when you become a Samaritan, because very strongly Samaritans feel that if we were to try and fix, offer solutions, offer suggestions, suggest this, that, or the other, we do an absolute disservice, because we're not allowing the person, the caller, to work through their own thoughts and feelings, to develop and understand what the real issues are for them. They know what works best for them, we don't. And if we try and suggest things, we take over from them. You stop listening, and we've taken away the call from them. If we give them the time and the support to think through, to talk through, to consider different options, people will find their own solutions, and that's empowering for them. We're not taking away from them, we are supporting them towards their own solutions. So no, we don't solve their problems. They find ways to solve their own through the gentle sort of questions that we might ask and the reflective conversation that we have with them. I think then I would like to thank both Lauren and Scarlett, first of all, for leading us through. And thank all of you. We've had 16 people with us this evening. And it's been great to have your responses and to have your questions. It's not an easy subject to always listen to. And we're grateful for your attendance. Thank you very much. And we will say goodbye now. Goodbye. Thank you.